Good evening, everybody. It's Monday night. Another episode of Parshat. Okay, this week's Parshat is Tetzaveh. It's famous. I mean, we spoke about this last year, but I'm going completely different now. The Balaturim says, and other commentators explain, that from the time Moshe Rabbeinu was born in Parshat Shmos, through the book of Shmos, Vayikra Bamidbar, not Devarim, because Devarim Moshe Rabbeinu was speaking. But every Parsha in the Torah has Moshe Rabbeinu's name mentioned. The only one which is not mentioned is Parshat Tetzaveh. Moshe Rabbeinu is not mentioned in Parshat Tetzaveh. And it says why. What's the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu was left out of an entire Parsha of Chumash? So sages explain, because when the Jews sinned in the golden calf, Hashem wanted to, destroy the Jewish people. So Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem, forgive them, v'im ayin, and if you don't, mecheni no mesifrecha asher kosafta, erase me from the book that you're writing. In other words, erase me from the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem, if you don't forgive the Jewish people for sinning in the golden calf, just take me out of your whole book. I don't want to have anything to do with Torah. Which is very interesting because the pasuk says, Zichru Torahs Moshe Avdi. The whole Torah is called on Moshe Rabbeinu's name. The Gemara says in Shabbos, Moshe Rabbeinu was humble, and because of that, Hashem said, I'm calling the whole Torah. The whole name of Torah is Zichru Torahs Moshe. You should remember the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. So therefore, the concept is that when a tzaddik gives a curse, even if there's no reason for the curse to be fulfilled because Hashem did forgive the Jewish people, nevertheless, a remnant of it stays, and therefore Hashem took Moshe Rabbeinu's name out of one parsha in Chumash. Why is it mentioned Parshat Tetzaveh? Why is this week's parsha? So the answer is because that parsha, this parsha, is read usually around the 7th of Adar, which is the day Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. So because it's the day that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, so therefore Hashem said, you know what, I'm going to take you out of the parsha where you passed away. Later on, we're going to discuss, I don't want to do that yet, but later on we're going to discuss, but Moshe Rabbeinu was born in Parshas Zayin Adar. Just like he passed away, Moshe Rabbeinu was born Zayin Adar. So why should Moshe Rabbeinu's name be taken out of Torah when he was born that day too? And the Gemara says that the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu should forgive the passing of Moshe Rabbeinu, meaning the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was born is good luck to undo the bad luck, so to speak, through Moshe Rabbeinu's passing. And we'll get to that later. Bottom line of this is as follows. What's going on over here is we see a very interesting lesson. Moshe Rabbeinu lived for Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu's life was Torah. And yet, for the sake of another Jew, Moshe Rabbeinu said, either forgive them. He didn't sin. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't sin. Moshe Rabbeinu was he was in Har Sinai. He didn't sin. He didn't do anything wrong. But Moshe Rabbeinu loved the Jews more to the extent Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem, if you don't forgive them, erase me from your book. Now let's understand what's going on over here. Who is Moshe Rabbeinu giving up his life for? Giving up his essence of Torah? For Jews that made complaint against Moshe Rabbeinu, well, it didn't happen yet, the 40, but a nation that was nonstop complaining against Moshe Rabbeinu. A nation that made the Egel, the golden calf, 40 days after Hashem revealed himself on Har Sinai. You can't get anything greater than that. And yet for those Jews, Moshe Rabbeinu gave up his life, more than his life. He said, erase me from Torah because the Jews are more important to me. And because of this, in today's Parsha, which deletes the name of Moshe Rabbeinu, the pasuk at the beginning of the Parsha says, "V'yikchu elecha shemen zayizach." The Jews should bring to Moshe Rabbeinu pure oil. Even though Aaron HaKohen was the one that really lit the Menorah, but they brought the oil to Moshe Rabbeinu. What is the concept of oil? Chassidus explains, oil can only be gotten from the olive when you torture it. When you press it, you squeeze it. That's when you get the oil out of the oil out of the olive. And in fact, the Gemara's expression is, when you press it, it gives out its oil. And Chassidus explains that by V'yikhu Elecha, the Jews bringing Moshe Rabbeinu the oil made Moshe Rabbeinu greater. The Jews made Moshe Rabbeinu greater than Moshe Rabbeinu was by himself. Which means by Moshe, because Moshe Rabbeinu had self-sacrifice of the Jewish people, Hashem basically said to him, the Jews are therefore going to make you greater than you are on your own. Why? So the explanation is, Moshe Rabbeinu says, later on in Chumash, Sheish me'es elef ragli ha'am asher anechi emed b'kirbei. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm standing in the midst of 600,000 feet, meaning 600,000 Jews. Moshe Rabbeinu is called head. All the Jews are called the feet of Moshe Rabbeinu. What's greater? Obviously, the head is greater than the foot. But there is an advantage of the foot over the head. And that is, if you want to get somewhere, the foot has to take the head there. The head cannot get anywhere without the foot, which means there's a certain uniqueness that the foot has, that the foot complements and completes the head, that the head on their own doesn't have it. And that's what the Jews did to Moshe Rabbeinu. The Yikhu Elecha is mentioned at the beginning of the Parsha because Moshe Rabbeinu, by having the Mesiras Nefesh for the Jews, that allowed, not that he did it for that purpose, he didn't know it was going to happen, but Moshe Rabbeinu therefore became greater because of the Mesiras Nefesh that he had for the Jewish people. What's the lesson for us? You can have people that make you crazy, people that drive you up a wall, people that make you problems, people that are totally not only non-religious, anti-religious. So somebody could think, okay, who cares about them? Let's just ignore them. And that's it. Let them go where they need to go. The lesson is, Moshe Rabbeinu teaches us that people that made your life miserable, people that rebelled against Hashem and 40 days after the Torah was given, made a golden calf, those Jews also have to be loved. And those Jews, you have to have Mesiras Nefesh for them. You have to have self-sacrifice for them, like Moshe Rabbeinu had. And in the long run, you're going to gain by it, not lose. That's the lesson from that aspect. Another interesting thing at the beginning of the Parsha, seemingly there's a contradiction with one pasuk to the next. It says at the beginning, the first pasuk says, again, like we just mentioned, you command the Yidden, they should bring oil to you, the oil for the menorah it's speaking about, lahales ner tamid, to light a continuous flame. Okay, the pasuk says to bring the oil to Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moshe Rabbeinu should light a constant, permanent light, 24/7. The next pasuk says Where was it lit? In the oil made outside of the Pereches. Yarech Eisei Aaron Novanov. Aaron should set up the Menorah. Me'erev ad boker. From evening to morning. Evening to morning is only night. Tamid means continuously 24/7. Erev Abayka means at night, kindle the Menorah. So the sages, that's a lot of the commentaries on Chumash, ask the question. Here it says Tamid, which means 24/7, and here it says evening to morning. And what's interesting is, by Moshe Rabbeinu, when it says bring the oil to Moshe Rabbeinu, it says to light a permanent candle. And by Aaron, it says Aaron will set up the Menorah from evening to morning. So what does this mean? So the Menorah, all the kalim, all the utensils in the Beis Hamikdash represent different aspects of the personal mishkan, the internal mishkan that every Jew has to build within themselves. Like we know, like we learned, make for me a migdash, like in last week's parsha, and I'll dwell in their midst. The Menorah represents two things. The Menorah represents Torah, Ner mitzvah, the Torah or. Torah is light. The Menorah is likened to Torah. But the Menorah was lit by Aaron HaKohen. What does Aaron HaKohen represent, and personify? He personifies sacrifices, korbanos. Moshe Rabbeinu was Torah. Aaron is Daved of Beis Hamikdash, Daved of korbanos, which includes, now that we don't have a Beis Hamikdash, it includes davening, and for that matter, it includes mitzvahs also. So you have basically Torah and mitzvahs. Torah is Moshe Rabbeinu. Mitzvahs is davening and doing mitzvahs. That's Daved of Aaron HaKohen. What's interesting, the Rebbe points out, when it comes to learning Torah, you have to learn day and night. There's a mitzvah for a man, and women are lucky, I would say in this. A man has an obligation to learn Torah 24/7. Mamish, 24/7, a man has an obligation to learn Torah. The Torah allows you to eat, to sleep, to do business, to exercise, to recreation a little bit. Bottom line is, a man, Torah is vagisa b'yomim v'layla. A person has an obligation to learn Torah tamid, constantly, 24/7. That's why by Moshe Rabbeinu, when it speaks the Menorah, the Shemen Zayis, Lema'or, to light the Menorah, by Moshe Rabbeinu, which represents Torah, the pasuk says Lahales ner tamid. It has to be continuous. It has to be constant. Torah has to be constantly learned. When it speaks about Aaron's Aveda of kindling the Menorah, that is the Aveda of davening, the Aveda of korbanos. What is the Aveda of davening? You don't daven a whole day. Yeah, the Gemara says in Brachas, Rabbi Yechanan said, Halavai sheyispalul adam kol hayom kulei. Rabbi Yechanan says, Halavai, a person should daven a whole day. But we don't daven. We have Shachris and we have Mincha. And then also later on, Ma'ariv. Or at the same time, whatever, the obligation of Ma'ariv. That's Erev and Baiker. That's night is Ma'ariv, Baiker, Mincha Ma'ariv at night, and Baiker is Shachris. The morning represents the Tefillah of Shachris. When it speaks about the Avodah of Aaron HaKohen, then there's Avodah of Erev HaBaiker, evening and morning. In a deeper sense, the Rebbe explains in the famous Maimer Va'ata Tetzaveh, the Rebbe speaks about squeezing the oil represents self-sacrifice of the Jew. It represents the self-sacrifice of a Jew, that a Jew is tortured for the sake of keeping Yiddishkeit, like it was in Haman's time, and in the Hanukkah time, and in the Hitler's time, and the Inquisition time, and the Khomeini's time. All these things are when the Jews were tortured, which brings out Mesiras Nefesh. The ultimate goal is to have Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, constantly. But in life, there is night and there is day. Night, darkness, represents when the Jews are suffering by being tortured in order to keep Yiddishkeit. When the month of Adar, it says, from the time Haman made a decree to annihilate, to get rid of the Jews, to fight, get rid of the Jews, yeah. The whole year, the Jews stood with Mesiras Nefesh. There was a decree against Torah mitzvahs. There was a decree to kill out the Jewish people. It was dark. That's Erev. Boiker, when it's day, when things are great. When things are great, represents there's no problem keeping Torah mitzvahs. There's no problem doing what Hashem wants us to do. But what is the problem? As the Rebbe explains in the famous Maimer starting Vata Tetzaveh, the Rebbe explains it's complacency in Golus. When a person is complacent in Golus, when a person is comfortable of the good time, of the light, while everything's great, we have nice houses and we have nice cars and we have nice jobs and we have good food and all that, that Mesiras Nefesh needs to be done also. So you have a few different things over here. You have Mesiras Nefesh lahalis ner tamid, to light a continuous flame of Mesiras Nefesh. But the Torah says it has to be both by Erev and it has to be also by Boker. What does that mean? The Rebbe writes in the Maimah, we know that many Jews, and the Rebbe gives the example of Russia, but it could be in any scenario. When the Jews were in Russia, there were a lot of Jews that had tremendous self-sacrifice for Yiddishkeit. Tremendous. They were in Siberia for 10 years, 15 years, whatever it was. Tremendous, tortured. And they risked their lives. And they made underground yeshivas and underground chadorim and underground mikvahs and underground shuls. Unbelievable Mesiras Nefesh. But the Rebbe writes, when they came to a free country, we don't see the same level of self-sacrifice than they had then. And the Rebbe says, ultimately, if Mesiras Nefesh is tamid, meaning it's constant, that means the self-sacrifice, Mesiras Nefesh, permeates the person to such an extent that whether it's evening Mesiras Nefesh or it's morning Mesiras Nefesh, it's the same being permeated. It's the same being permeated with the aspect of Mesiras Nefesh. And that's what the Parsha is telling us over here. There is Tamid, there has to be the attitude of continuously having Mesiras Nefesh. That there's no difference if it's evening or morning. Whatever the Jew has, they have this tremendous level of Mesiras Nefesh. Because if it permeates the essence, then there's no difference. I'll give you an example in a very simple thing. The Rebbe demanded from Chassidim everything. Learning, davening, miftzoyim, going out, spreading Yiddishkeit. The Rebbe constantly was demanding. So it was interesting. The Bachim that liked to learn, when the Rebbe spoke about learning, they were all excited. People that didn't have the, in Yiddish it's called the Sitzfleisch, they didn't have the patience to sit and learn, they were more outgoing miftzoyim, The Rebbe spoke about Mitzrayim. It was unbelievably great. That's wonderful. But you know what? If you want to talk about dedication and devotion to what the Rebbe wants, what's the difference if he wants Mitzrayim or he wants to learn Torah? If you are completely given over, not without your will and without your desires and without your nature involved, there wouldn't be any difference between the two. That is it's a super, super great level. I remember one year, a bunch of Russians came out from Russia. Then when the Iron Curtain opened up, a lot of Russians came out. And they were all by a Farbrengen. And then is an unbelievable sight. The Rebbe called out that all the Russians that came should say loud how many years they sat in prison for Yiddishkeit. The Rebbe made an auction. This guy said 10 years, this guy said 5 years, this guy said 18 years, this guy said, everybody was screaming out different numbers. And they actually was making an auction. Like the longer you sat, the greater you were. Because you had this tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. At the same time, we need to have equal Mesiras Nefesh for everything that we do, Erev, Abayke, whether it's Erev, night or day, anytime, but that's what we need. Okay, then the pasuk continues after that and says, you bring closer to you Aaron, your brother, Aaron Akayim. What does it mean, bring close to you? Physically, yeah, bring them, but that's not what it means. Spiritually, it means Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu, Hakrev Elecha, bring closer to your level. Bring closer to your level, Aaron Achicha, Aaron your brother. What is that? Even though Moshe Rabbeinu was greater than everybody, Moshe Rabbeinu was the number one, the leader, the first Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader of the Jewish people. Nevertheless, when Adar Kohen is becoming close, Moshe Rabbeinu elevates them to a state of oneness with Moshe Rabbeinu. Because Aaron Achicha, Aaron your brother, meaning he's your brother not only physically but spiritually. Moshe Rabbeinu, and this is what the Rebbe explained, what a Nasi, what a Rebbe does, he takes people, even though he's the Rebbe of everybody. He's the Rebbe, Moshe Rabbeinu was the Rebbe, the Moshe Rabbeinu of the whole generation. A Rebbe is the Rebbe of the entire generation. But there are certain people that become closer, and I'll explain that in a minute, and the Rebbe elevates them to a higher level, more than others. Meaning like this. In Perek Beis of Tanya, in the second chapter of Tanya, the Rebbe says all neshamas come from the same place. Just like the baby comes from the semen, the seed of the father, the whole baby is included in that one seed. And then when it goes through 9 months of pregnancy, so then this becomes the head openly, and the hands and the stomach and the foot and the various different parts of the body. But they all really originate in one seed of the father. So the Rebbe explains, then all seeds originate in Atzilus. But as the neshamas come down from heaven into the body, certain neshamas remain on that lofty level of Atzilus, like Moshe Rabbeinu. Some neshamas come into the world of Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, various different levels. Then the Alter Rebbe says in second parak of Tanya that the sustenance of the generation, the chayis of the generation, comes from the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation. That means in order to have sustenance of Hashem, from Hashem, it must go through the Moshe Rabbeinu. He is the head, he is the communicator, he is the nerve center, he is the Klal Yisrael, like it says, Nasi Huakol. He's Klal Yisrael. And then the Alter Rebbe says like this: those people that rebel against the Talmud Chacham, and the Rebbe explained, our Rebbe explained, it does. The Alter Rebbe is not saying people that are not religious. They might be religious, but they're not connected. They rebel against the concept of Moshe Rabbeinu. So then it says, Alter Rebbe says, their nourishment comes from Moshe Rabbeinu anyway. But it comes from Achuraya, meaning over the shoulder type of chayas. There's the analogy, you like somebody, you'll give them face to face, you'll smile at them, you'll give them. If you don't like somebody, but you have to give them, so figurative, the expression goes, I'll throw it over my shoulder. Meaning I don't want to look at you, but you're still getting sustained from me. So the Rebbe is explaining over here, what Moshe Rabbeinu is bringing Adar and HaKohen closer, meaning those people that are close to Moshe Rabbeinu elevates to a higher state. How do we become close to Moshe Rabbeinu? So we learned already many times what the previous Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe writes, and is brought down in Ayin Yom, by learning what they teach us and doing what they want us to do. That's the way we connect. And then we connect the Nasi, the leader of the generation, elevates us to a place that we wouldn't be able to be elevated on our own. And now to say this with an interesting story, there was a very big chassid, the Rebbe Rashab, the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe, he was officially the Rav of Beis Rav of the Friedrich Rebbe. His name was Shmuel Levittin. Shmuel Levittin. When he passed away, the Rebbe spoke about, there are certain few people that after they passed away, the Rebbe spoke about them by Fabrenis. After Shmuel Levittin, he was an older chassid who passed away, and the Rebbe said the week in Shabbos after he passed away, the Rebbe Fabrein, and the Rebbe said that he once came into me for Chassidus. The Rebbe said it was only the four eyes, meaning nobody else was in the room, and he said he didn't need to show off for anybody. And he told the Rebbe when he was in Siberia for many years, what really bothered him, he didn't have a siddur. They didn't have svarim. They didn't have a siddur. He davened by heart. When it came in brachas in the morning, we say a bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam, hanosein la'ya'ef koyach. Hashem gives to the tired people that are tired, he gives them strength. He said to the Rebbe, for years, I was tortured. I didn't remember, was the bracha hanesin la ya'ef koyach or le'ayef koyach, which would be the same thing. And the Rebbe said it bothered him. That's what he told the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, we're under four eyes, there's no reason for him to make it up. The Rebbe said, and I remember the Rebbe saying this, and here in Yiddish, and here you see the level that the previous Rebbe can elevate his chassidim to. That the Friedrich Rebbe elevated this chassid to such an extent. What bothered him? Not that he didn't have any food, and he didn't have any beds, and he had hard labor. He didn't remember, is the bracha la ya'ef koyach or oyef koyach? So you see that people that are connected, the Moshe Rabbeinu elevates to a much higher level. Okay, later on in the Parsha, the Torah speaks about the two altars, the two mizbeches, whichever you want to call it, or in English, mizbeachs, that were in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Mishkan. One was called the Mizbeach HaZahav. the golden Mizbeach. It was made out of gold. What was done on that Mizbeach? That was all the way inside, where the Menorah and the Shulchan was, right outside the Holy of Holies. On that Mizbeach HaZahav, they brought the daily incense, the Ketores. That's what they brought on the Mizbeach HaZahav. You were not allowed to bring sacrifices on that altar. It was a smaller altar. The only thing that it was allowed to bring on that altar was the incense that they brought every day in the Mizbeach. That was called, in the Gemara, in Pasuk, in Gemara, Mizbeach HaPnimi, the inside Mizbeach. Literally, the inside Mizbeach means it's all the way in, right outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. We're only Kohanim, we're allowed to go into that room. Even that room outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, only the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur went. But the room outside of it, so then Kohanim, only when they did Aveda, only when they worked, were they allowed to go in there. Outside was called the Mizbeach HaNecheshes. It's called Mizbeach HaDama Tasali. It was made out of dirt, but it was coated with copper. It's called the Mizbeach HaNecheshes. What did they do on that Mizbeach? They brought korbanos, they brought sacrifices. The Gemara says that all the utensils in the Beis HaMikdash were prone to become tamei. In fact, the Gemara says after Yom Tov, after all the Jews came to the Beis HaMikdash, they were toivel in the mikvah, the utensils of the Beis HaMikdash, except two. The Mizbeach HaPnimi, the inner Mizbeach, and the Mizbeach HaNecheshes, the gold Mizbeach and the copper Mizbeach. And the Gemara says two reasons, either because they were basically earth, or because they were covering and the coating was bottled to the cover, whatever. But the point is, why only those two? And what do those two represent? So again, the Rebbe explains, what's the difference between gold and copper? Gold is wealth. Gold represents wealth, and copper represents poverty. Necheshes, copper, tin. In fact, it said, the Rambam brings down that when they came up to build the second Beis HaMikdash in the days of Ezra and Nehemiah, they were so poor they couldn't even build the Menorah out of gold. They had to build it out of tin, out of necheshes, out of copper. Then when they got more money, they rebuilt the golden. So necheshes represents poverty, and Mizbeach HaZahav, the golden Mizbeach, represents wealth. In the Jewish tests that God tests us, Chazal tell us there's two types of tests. There's the test of poverty and the test of wealth. In fact, the Gemara says, when somebody comes up to heaven after 120 years, the first question they ask you is, besides did you wait for Mashiach, did you learn Torah? And the Gemara says, if somebody will come along and say, I couldn't learn Torah, I was too poor. I had to make a living. I didn't have time to learn Torah. I had to go keep constantly getting different jobs to it. So the Gemara says Hashem's going to tell him in heaven, you were not poorer than Hillel. Hillel was very, very poor, and yet Hillel learned Torah. Another guy's going to come up to heaven and say, I didn't learn Torah because I was very wealthy. I don't have to run a business. I'm running an empire, a multi-billion-dollar empire. Who has time to learn Torah? So they're going to tell him in heaven, you were not richer than Rabbi Elazar ben Kisma. And the Gemara says how wealthy he was. And you know something? He also learned Torah. So there's two types of tests Hashem gives us. One is the test of poverty, and one is the test of wealth. By the way, it's interesting. Our sages tell us, yes, we mentioned that in the past. Copper and Nachesh is the same thing as Nachash, which is the source of all evil. And the Choshen, by the way, the breastplate was also Choshen, which is also the same letters as Nocheshes and Nachash. Okay, but let's go back to what we're talking. So, Moshe Sfarim say, and Chassidus says, the test of poverty is not as severe as the test of wealth. Or, to paraphrase it, the test of suffering is not the same as the test of freedom. And it's interesting, when Jews were tortured in the ghettos and in Europe and wherever it was, Jews stayed loyal to Yiddishkeit. They didn't assimilate. Now that we have freedom in America, then people, sorry, sad to say, it shouldn't be anymore. Jews assimilate amongst the Goyim. Chazal tell us that the test of wealth is worse and more difficult than the test of poverty. I know everybody says, give me the test of wealth. But the Torah says it's not the good test to want. What is this concept of the Mizbeches? The Mizbech HaNecheshes represents the poverty, the tests of poverty. Mizbech HaZav represents the tests of gold. Both of them have one thing in common. They can never become tamei. What is the gold and what is the copper? That's the coating of the Mizbeach. They're mitzupim. They're plated with gold and plated with copper. The Mizbeach itself, and therefore the Gemara says it was secondary to the offer of the Mizbeach Adama, Mizbach Adama, Tasili, which means the essence of the Jew, which is dirt, meaning bittul, humility, that can never become impure. And that's why the Torah is teaching us in today's Parsha that the Mizbeach HaZahav, the golden altar, and the copper altar, everything else in the Beis HaMikdash could become tamei. But the two altars, Mizbeach HaNecheshes, Mizbeach HaZahav, even though they represent the test of wealth and the test of poverty that people can fail, and nevertheless, the Gemara says they can never become tamei because the essence of the Jew is always pure. He's always bottled to Hashem. And therefore, the Torah is teaching us they can never become tamei. And therefore, the point is like this. Because even when a Jew sins, like the Gemara says, Afal pi shechata, we learn to speak simply. The Gemara says, Afal pi shechata Yisraelu. The Gemara doesn't say, there's a lot of names for the Jews. Afal pi shechata Yisraelu means even when he sins, he's still the loftiest level of a Jew, which is the name Yisrael. There's a pasuk that says, Gam b'shas hachet. I don't know if it's a pasuk or Chazal. Gam b'shas hachet. Even at the time the person is sinning, Haisa ba'amna itai, he was trustworthy with Hashem. Even at the time, the action of sinning, you are still connected to Hashem. And that's the greatness. What the Mizbeches are teaching us, no matter whether your wealth, poverty, spiritual wealth, physical wealth, it doesn't matter, emotional wealth, emotional poverty. Bottom line, you never become tamei because we're always connected to Hashem. Tonight happens to be Zayin Adar. Tonight happens to be the 7th of Adar, which this year is a leap year. So there's a whole question in halacha. If somebody, let's say, passes away in a regular year, okay, when do they keep the yard site? Do they keep it in the first Adar, the second Adar? The Beis Yosef holds second Adar, and that's where a lot of Sfardim keep the second Adar. The Ramah holds that you keep the first Adar, and that's what most Ashkenazim keep. Says that Allah, you should try to do both. The question is like this. Moshe Rabbeinu's yard site was Zayin Adar, 7th of Adar. What's interesting, We mentioned before at the beginning, Moshe's Rabbeinu's name was taking out a Parshat Tetzaveh because that's usually when Zion Adar is. But what's interesting, in a leap year, the second Adar is never Tetzaveh. It's like Vayikra or 4 weeks later. It seems that Hashem took Moshe Rabbeinu in the first Adar, or when there is a leap year. Okay, now, the Gemara says in Saita, I don't want to elaborate to what the Gemara says, but the one opinion in the Gemara says, Moshe Rabbeinu was born in a leap year. This is what the Gemara says over there. Moshe Rabbeinu was born in a leap year, and he was born the first Adar. That's what the Gemara says in Saita according to one opinion. Which means Moshe Rabbeinu was born Zion Adar. Moshe Rabbeinu passed away Zion Adar. All in a leap year, and seemingly it's Adar Rishon. Now, halachically interesting, if a person is born in a regular Adar, birthday is celebrated in the second Adar, not the first Adar. But a yard site, and there's a whole halacha reason difference, but it's not for now. And now, we know that on Zion Adar, which was the birthday of Moshe Rabbeinu, it says in Yerushalmi, the Talmud Yerushalmi, it says that on the day of somebody's birthday, Mazal goiver, his Mazal is very, very powerful. That's why people on birthdays, it's a Mazal day. They can give brachas, they can do a lot of things. You have to behave very well, and you have to have learning and davening and tzedakah and atilim and a lot of good, because it's a very special day. Anytime a person has a birthday, it's Mazal goiver. The Mazal of the person is powerful. The Gemara tells a story. Haman wanted to destroy the Jewish people. Haman wanted to destroy the Jewish people. And he was a very superstitious guy. He didn't know when to do it. So he cast lots. He made a lottery. That's why it's called Purim. Or a Geidel. Haman cast lots to know which day should he destroy the Jews. And the lottery fell out in the month of Adar. And Haman was very, very happy. Why was Haman happy that it fell out in Adar? Because that Haman said that was the month Moshe Rabbeinu died, so it's bad luck for the Jews, and that month is a good month to destroy the Jewish people. The Gemara says the fool didn't know that it's also Moshe Rabbeinu's birthday. Moshe Rabbeinu was born Zion Adar, died Zion Adar the same day, exactly 120 years later. Haman didn't know that Moshe Rabbeinu was born, and the day of birth outweighs the day of his passing. So what Haman didn't know, the Gemara says, is that it was really a Mazal Dika month. Not only that, even though Haman wanted to destroy the Jewish people on the 14th and 15th of Adar, but the pasuk says in the Megillah, "HaChodesh an asher nepach l'sasin u'lesimcha." The whole month, the Megillah says, the whole month of Adar was a month that was transformed to goodness. Question is, it was only one day, 2 days, Yudalad, the 14th, 15th. Because of the Mazal, we see that the whole month of Adar is a very special month. To the extent, there is halacha. If a person is not going to have a Megillah on Purim, but they have a Megillah at the beginning of Adar, the din is they could read the Megillah without a bracha at the beginning of Adar, and according to many opinions, fulfills his obligation. Why? Because the Torah uses the word HaChodesh, the whole month was transformed to good. Now, the Rebbe explains like this: because Moshe Rabbeinu is the Nasi, the leader of Jewish people, and we just said before What Rashi says in Chumash, Hanasi hu hakol, the Nasi is everybody. Therefore, when Moshe Rabbeinu's Mazal is powerful, it's the Mazal of every single Jew is powerful. The Mazal of every single Jew is powerful on Zion Adar, which is the birthday of Moshe Rabbeinu. And not only Zion Adar, but we see in the story in the Gemara and in the Megillah, the whole month Hamanu was affected because of Moshe Rabbeinu. He thought death, but it was really his birth. So therefore, this month, the Mazal of every single Jew is very, very powerful. And the Rebbe explains like this. What is, listen to this, unbelievable. Zion Adar. Zion is 7. That means completion of all the 7 midos. That means a person is permeated and refined. Chesed, Gevura, Teferes, Netzach, Ava, Yira, all the 7 midos a person is refining. What's Adar? Adar is 2 words. Aleph, Dor. Aleph refers to Hashem. Dor in Hebrew means to live. What does Adar mean? Hashem comes to live in his home. Dira betachtonim, Hashem lives. So it says, the Rebbe explains what Zion Adar. Zion Adar is the day that Hashem comes into the world because we refine the 7 midos, and therefore Hashem comes into the world. And that explains what it says. When Moshe Rabbeinu was born, the whole house became full of light. It says in the beginning of Shmos, when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, they saw it was good. And the Gemara says, and Rashi brings it down, what good? When Hashem created light on the first day, it's a Vayar Elokim Ki Tov. Light is good. What did Hashem, when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, the whole house lit up with light. That's Zion Adar. Aleph was Hashem, but also Or. The light of Hashem, Dor, comes down into us. So that's why it's a very, very special day. But therefore, the Gemara says like this. Shenichnas Adar, the Gemara says, Marbim b'simcha. When the month of Av enters, you look at the Gemara, it's famous. They even have a song. Shenichnas means as soon as Adar enters, Marbim b'simcha, you add simcha. That means you don't wait for Zion Adar. This has an impact on the whole month of Adar, that birth of Moshe Rabbeinu, which caused the exodus of Egypt. Moshe Rabbeinu took the Jews out of Galus. Not only that, the whole story of Purim came about because Haman cast lots for the month of Adar, which he thought was bad luck because, like we said, Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. But the bottom line is Moshe Rabbeinu's birth saved that. That means Moshe Rabbeinu affected even the miracle of Purim. Even Purim was affected by Moshe Rabbeinu. So therefore, when the whole month of Adar comes, you don't have to wait for Zion Adar. The Gemara says, Shenichnas Adar, Marbim b'simcha. As soon as Adar comes, you have to have an abundance of simcha. And as we spoke Shabbos and Shova, not too many of you were there then, the fact that there's 2 Adars, the Rebbe says means there's 60 days of simcha. 60 days of simcha. That the Rebbe always brings down the last din in Shulchan Aruch of Orach Chaim, the first section of Shulchan Aruch, the last siman that Ramah brings down about Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni, and he concludes with Tov Leiv Mishta Tamid. It's good to always party. Not party getting drunk and acting like an idiot, a fool. I'm saying the level of simcha. And Rebbe says, Simcha in two others is 60 days. What does 60 days mean? We mentioned the Shabbos, but very briefly, 60 is the number in Torah that nullifies something not good that falls into it. If meat falls into milk, it becomes nullified 1 in 60. Non-kosher falls into kosher, it becomes nullified 1 in 60. What is the power of 60? The power of 60 nullifies anything which is not good. Which means all the terrible things that can happen, sadness, depression, kvetching, whatever you want to call it, all those things that can cause bad things, the 60 days of Adar, this year, because we have a leap year, it's very fortunate that we have a leap year, nullifies everything. It's bottled. Anything negative of simcha, anything which is not simcha, becomes nullified and it's non-existent, and you can keep being the simcha. That is the lesson of Adar, with Zion Adar, and the fact that this year is a leap year. Okay, now I want to go back to something at the beginning of the Parsha. I didn't know how much time we had, so I see that we have time. So I'm going to go back to something at the beginning. We mentioned before, and Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned in this Parsha. Okay, we said why? Because he said Egel, whatever. Hashem took him out. But how does the Torah begin? The pasuk begins with V'ata Tetzaveh. What does V'ata Tetzaveh mean? You command. Normally, the pasuk says, how does Chumash mean? Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe, Lema Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, tell the Jewish people. What is Hashem telling Moshe Rabbeinu over here? He's not saying his name, Moshe. His name is not mentioned. But what does Hashem say instead? The ato, your essence, which is even above name. There is a concept of a name. We learned in Chassidus, in a lot of classes of Chassidus, we learned what's the concept of a name. A name is not for you. The purpose of a name is to be identified by other people. You want to be called from a crowd. You want to be spoken about. They want to speak about what somebody did, only good, obviously. So you need a name. Or we said many times, can you imagine nameless Lashon Hara is worthless? Nobody will get enjoyment by saying, you know what somebody did, without saying a name. It's boring. A name is not the essence of the person. He's the way the person is identified. How do you call the essence of the person? Not by name, but V'ata, you. We mentioned many times. You have in the 10 Commandments, Asar Sedibris. Anechi Hashem Elokecha. The Gemara says, Anechi Mishanechi L'Yisram T'lei B'Shum Eis T'lei B'Shum Kais. Anechi means I, the essence of Hashem. Then Havaya is the infinite revelation of Hashem, and Elokecha is the finite revelation of Hashem. We make a bracha every day, countless times, 100 times a day, literally. We say, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu. Atah is you, nameless, above name. The Rebbe brings down, it says in Chassidus, an interesting thing. There's a Gemara that says, don't ask me what it means because nobody knows what it means. Hashem traveled 500 years. Okay, Mahalach Tak Shana Liknes Leishem, to acquire a name for himself. Okay, Mahalach HaKadosh Baruch Hu Tak Shana, whatever it means, 500 years. According to what it means, walking, flying, spaceship, driving, whatever. It's obviously levels. Hashem goes 500 years to acquire a name. Now, What is 500? What is 500? You have like this. The neshama has 5 names. Each one is composed of 10 times 10. So 10 times 10 is 100 times 5. The 5 names is 500. Okay? But, so a name is connected to 100. Because how do you get the 100? 500, it's 10 times 10 times 5 for the 5 names. But, so it's all connected to 100. So name is connected to 100. How many psukim are in this week's Parshat Tetzaveh? 101. 1 above 100. When you say Asher, Tainug, pleasure, Tainug, which is higher than name, is the essence, equals 501. Name is connected to 500. Pleasure, essence, is connected to 501, above time and place, above essence. What does this mean? Moshe Rabbeinu, yes, Hashem took away his name, but because of his Mesiras Nefesh, Hashem gave him his essence. He revealed his essence. The Ata, you. What is the role of a Moshe Rabbeinu? What is the function of a Moshe Rabbeinu? Hashem says in this week's Parsha, I'm not saying your names. I'm not saying your levels of identification, Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm not speaking about your learning and your davening and your mitzvahs. I'm not speaking about that. I'm speaking about you, your essence. Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, you know what your role is? Tetzaveh as B'nai Yisrael. Tetzaveh means command, but the Zohar says Tetzaveh means connect. Tzavsa v'chibur, connection. What is the role and function of Moshe Rabbeinu? The function of Moshe Rabbeinu is to bind Jews to Hashem. That's what the function of Moshe Rabbeinu is. Now, so therefore, this parsha, in fact, it's interesting. The famous Maimer, Ba'ata Tetzaveh, okay, the Rebbe gave out, it was said earlier years, the Rebbe gave it out, Purim Katan, okay, this was the 13th of Adar. The Rebbe had his stroke to 27th of the first Adar. So it's 14 days, 2 weeks before the Rebbe's stroke, when the Rebbe couldn't talk anymore, and that was it with Sichos and Maimorim, it was done. Hashem took away the power of speech from the Rebbe, and the Rebbe couldn't talk Maimorim and Sichos. The last Maimer the Rebbe gave out was exactly 30 years ago, this week, Purim Katan, or next week. Purim Katan, the 13th of Adar, for that Shabbos, the Rebbe gave out the famous Maimer Ba'ata Tetzaveh, which was the last Maimer the Rebbe edited, which was the Rebbe's, as the Rebbe said about the previous Rebbe's Basi Lagani. This was the Rebbe's will, last will and testament to Chassidim about Mesiras Nefesh. By being connected to Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe Rabbeinu instills within us and connects us to Hashem in a way that no other thing could be connected. And this is the connection to the Parsha. Yeah. Anyway, it's late already. So Mitzvah Shem Wednesday night. Again, we'll have Halach and Tanya 8 o'clock. Please come tell your friends about it. Until then, everybody stay healthy, wealthy, and wise. And have a very good next few days until we see you on Wednesday night.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take care.
Good night.